For those of you joining us, my name is Dr. Dimple Patel. I am the chair of the DEI committee for AFSP Illinois. And on behalf of AFSP Illinois, thank you so much for joining us today. Um, as the members of the AFSP DEI committee, we are dedicated to increasing awareness, representation, and fairness to create a safe and welcoming space that fosters meaningful change and reflects on the communities that we serve. Disparities in across Disparities in access to care and treatment are among the many challenges that diverse communities face in managing mental health. Addressing these inequities is essential when discussing mental health, especially for marginalized communities. Together, we strive to build an equitable and inclusive culture, prioritizing mental health daily. So, thank you again so much for joining us. And tonight, our topic will be Unseen and Unheard, Restoring Empathy in a Divided World. With that being said, I would like to introduce you to our first panelist, Christina Castillo. Christina is a program coordinator at the Center for Rural Health and Social Service Department at SIU School of Medicine. In this role, she collaborates with other colleagues and community organizations to address educational and equity gaps affecting the Hispanic and Latino population, while working to remove barriers in advance to health equality. Christina focuses on the unique experiences of Hispanic and Latino population, including adverse childhood experiences and social determinants of mental health, and the impact these have in the 8 dimensions of wellness. Prior to joining the SIU School of Medicine, Christina served as the director for Undocumented Student Support and Hispanic Latino Resource Center. She fostered a welcoming and inclusive environment, promoting cultural pride and belonging while developing workshops and training programs to educate students, faculty, and staff. Christina also is a dedicated educator who believes in teaching both the mind and heart, combining compassion, intentional care, and a deep understanding with the unique challenges faced by marginalized communities to promote well-being and human dignity. Thank you, Christina, for joining us today. And our second panelist is Dr. Ryan Reed Sr. Dr. Reed is a nationally recognized trauma-informed therapist, speaker, author, and community healer who has dedicated over 17 years to mental health advocacy, reentry reform, and youth empowerment. As the Southern Illinois Youth Supervisor for the GRO community and founder of Broken Hero Enterprises and Youth Empowerment Works, Dr. Reed blends clinical expertise with lived experience to transform systems that fail marginalized population. A doctoral degree in rehabilitation counseling and education, Dr. Reed has led thousands of Black and Brown men and boys towards healing through culturally responsive programming, mentoring, and therapeutic care. His groundbreaking work in clinical training, trauma recovery, and emotional intelligence has reached national platforms and continues to reshape the landscape of holistic care. Thank you guys for joining us. And now I will transition it over to Tammy, who will be moderating the discussion.
Good evening. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening. We are going to get right to it and get everything started on this evening. Again, my name is Tammy Bush. I am one of the board members for the Illinois chapter of American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. We are going to go ahead and get started with the questions. And Brian, I'm going to have you get us started. One of the first questions is, what does the term empathy crisis toward minorities mean in today's society? And how does it appear? And I'm going to say something first. It says, to me, it means people stop seeing the humanity in others. For minorities, it show up as silence, stereotypes, and being overlooked in a daily life. Ryan, what can you share with us about this particular question? What does it mean to you?
Well, I think it's exactly what you said. The silencing of voices. Before I got here today, right? I had planned up an entire segment of what I was going to talk about. I was going to type it out. Why was I going to do that? Because far too often, my words haven't had the power that they need to have. They haven't been able to impact the lives that I feel like they should. Why? Because most times we are silenced. We are silenced because of our skin color. We are silenced because of our beliefs. We are silenced because of the way that we dress. We are silenced because of the way that we talk. And the beauty behind that silence is it allows our passion to burn a lot louder, right? Most times when you look at Black and brown men, we are mistaken our pride, our joy, our passion is most times mistaken as anger. And it hurts a lot of the time when I realize that stuff, because what I've realized is society has stopped seeing our full humanity. It's as if like the numbness in the headlines when another Black or brown body is broken. We talked about this last time. We talk about how we have essentially created this thing I like to call murder porn, where the levels of dopamine are increased every time we're able to see Black and brown bodies drop. We witness so many Black and brown boys that are attending funerals not shed one tear. Why? Because essentially they've been broken so much that this is the norm for them. And when it's time to actually speak about the pain that we experience, when it's time to speak about the things that we've undergone, we've been silenced not just by society, but we've also been silenced within our own homes. Big boys don't cry, big girls don't cry, suck it up, be a man, get over it. What does that even mean? And I hear people say all the time, right? You're so strong. But I've seen the faces of so many Black and brown boys, men, and women that ask the question, but why do I have to be? Why do I have to be stronger than you? Why do I have to suck it up so much to where you aren't able to hear my silent cries? So many of us are crying in dark rooms with nobody to hear us. And so the power behind actually acknowledging empathy, the power behind realizing that this is a crisis, means that we'll finally be able to look at other communities, entire communities, living and dying under the cloud of indifference. And we'll finally be able to put a meaning and a sound and a word to that suffering. And I feel like it's something that needs to happen. It has to happen. And today I'm blessed to know that you all invited me here. But the problem is I wish I didn't have to be here. I wish I didn't have to talk about these topics. I wish that there were millions of people watching the message that we're trying to project to the world that lets them know I matter, my voice matters, I deserve to be heard just as much as yours, despite your skin color not matching mine.
Wow, thank you for that. And like you said, it is a crisis. And that leads me into my next question. When we say the world feels divided, what do you think is at the root of that division? And I would like for both of you all to answer this question. And Christina, when we think about the root of division, I think about fear of difference, fear of change, and a lack of listening. So, what can you say about the root of division?
Well, first of all, thank you. And like Ryan said, being here, I wish also I didn't have to be here speaking on behalf of our Latino community and our Black and Brown people, right? And our marginalized communities. But the fact is that this crisis exists, and it is right now the root. I believe it is basically the lack of support, the diminished compassion that we have had, the decreasing willingness to help others because there is a disregard of the issues or dismissal of the struggles, right? Minority groups have been historically portrayed as criminal, as lazy, violent, savages, and intelligent in education and in media, but it is also or a burden to society, right? We are politicized, a police different than our white majority, and these labels and stereotypes and narratives reduce the empathy by stripping our humanity. But also, I think that at the root right now is, of course, all this is this didn't started within this decade or last decade, right? This has been going on and building up to this point. But I think that one of the things that has been at the root right now that has propelled this division is the media, right? And the unwillingness to want to inform ourselves of really what is happening about the other person. We see them as others. We see them as they don't look like me, therefore their issues don't pertain me, and they don't, and I should not be bothered. And then there's this also understanding that people want to believe what they or listen only what it fits their beliefs. So if there is racism and there's supremacy, white supremacy of thought, then therefore people are going to be looking for the narratives that fit their beliefs. And therefore it is the social media and these outlets that are there right now, constructing all this misinformation and providing it, and then the unwillingness to really inform ourselves is what I believe it is has propelled this empathy crisis to a level that we are seeing right now. That, in my opinion, it feels sometimes as if it is a collective mental health threat, because it's really real, and there's something always on TV, on social media, seeing these discriminations and seeing somebody as not worthy, dehumanizing them. And I think that that's the problem right now, that our social media, it is a problem, and then it also brings the awareness, which is an awareness that I wish I didn't have to go through.
All right, thank you. So Ryan, what can you add to that? What do you have to say about the
So,
root of the division?
so when we look at the division of empathy as a whole, we have to look at the reality behind it, right? It's not distributed equally. It's essentially rationed, and it often depends on what race, class, gender, sexuality, immigration status, or sometimes your neighborhood zip code. Some suffering elicits immediate sympathy, right?
Unknown caller.
Tons of resources being offered. Other suffering, especially in the communities that I grew up in, it gets ignored, you're blamed, or essentially you're outright criminalized. So if we look at the history behind it, right? When we had this opioid crisis, which it was considered a health crisis, it was only considered a crisis because it was in white suburban communities. But of course, when we look at when we had this, when we looked at how the crack wave devastated Black communities, it was called a crime wave. That's the pure definition of what the division of empathy looked like. When we look at school shootings happening in affluent suburbs, the country mourns collectively. But when gun violence kills children on the south side of Chicago or East St. Louis, the response is often, well, that's just what happens there. That's typically what happens when you got the Black on Black crime. But last time I checked, death is death, and it hurts us all. But if I take it a step further and I make it more personal, right? So for me, the division of empathy was personal. As a young Black man who was grieving the loss, not only of my father at 7, not only of my grandmother at 5, not only of the death of my grandfather at 9, no one ever really asked me how was I doing. Instead, I was told to be strong. I was told to man up. And later I ended up battling severe addiction, and society labeled me as an addict before it labeled me as a man in pain. That's the division others got treated for. The division others got treated for, I got judged for. But here's the beauty. When I finally faced my wounds with my mother, like I did on maybe national TV, the world was able to heal from it. But the problem still remains. Most people ask, so how are you guys doing? I'm not doing well, because a lot of that internalized pain, a lot of that internalized grief, a lot of that internalized trauma showed up in the lives of other people that didn't deserve it. And for people in my community, a lot of times we end up bleeding on people that never hurt us. And most times we're considered the villain, and we're considered someone who shouldn't be looked at as humane. And that's the part that hurts. And that's where division has us. And that's where division takes us. But the beauty behind today is the fact that we get to talk about it, right? Essentially, it is why democracy feels fragile, why violence feels unsending, why healing feels delayed. But the cure is radical love. And that's what we're showing today. And I think a lot of times we focus so much on the problem that we don't realize where we've come from and how much we've grown. And conversations like today, once again, I want to say thank you for allowing us here and to have this safe space to express ourselves. Because 9 times out of 10, when I was 7 years old, when I was 9 years old, I didn't have that safe space. And sometimes even in my own communities.
Oh, wow. You both talked about, Christina talked about the burden to society. You mentioned Black on Black crime, racism, which leads to our next question. Christina, I want you to take this question. What are the key societal, cultural, and historical factors that cause a lack of empathy toward minority groups?
Well, that's plenty of right. Because as I mentioned, this has not happened recently, this division, this empathy crisis and division. We'll start from the colonial and conquest, right? European colonial expansion created this hierarchical placing white European identities and devaluing indigenous African, non-European people. So this ideology justified genocide, slavery, and the cultural erasure. Legacy is still embedded in the current system, right? So like, for example, the caste system in Latin America and the doctrine of discovery. This legal and religious concept was used to justify colonization and legitimize this position and create religious and racial supremacy. So this justified to take away lands from Native Americans, from Mexicans, to erase our ancestral practices, to erase the practices of Black enslaved people, right? So then we have also the slavery and the racial capitalism. I want to talk a little bit of, I'm not too informed, but the transatlantic trade, slave trade and plantation economies treated the human beings as property. Africans were stripped away from their native land, separated from their families. We see a pattern there, right? The separation from family, the separation from their loved ones at the expense of profit, and then dehumanizing and being enslaved. So all of these horrific actions had shaped racial attitudes and institutionalized anti-Blackness globally. So they were seen only as a profit, not as humans. So this legacy persists through the criminalization of Black and brown people, the disproportionately harsh policing, and the economic exploitations, and the lack of recognition of their contributions. And it comes to mind with the Black community, the attack on Black Wall Street in Oklahoma. I mean, this horrific event is just that sense of moving forward on not acknowledging that the Black communities and the Black and brown people have also the capacity to do and build and create and be successful. And so therefore that sense of, okay, well, they're catching up with us, and then let's destroy them and set them back to where they belong. And so that sense of you don't belong, you don't are worthy to progress here. And then the segregation and legal discrimination, also the Jim Crow laws, right? The immigration quotas and interracial marriages, those laws have basically normalized exclusion. Also the Chinese Exclusion Act and the Mexican repatriation of the 1934 and the Operation Wetback dehumanized Asian and Latino communities. And so these acts, in simple terms, mean you don't belong here. You need to be away from this country. This country was colonized by white Europeans that have set a standard. So all these historical events have caused inequities, have trickled down to the education, housing, healthcare, the criminalization of Black and brown people. And it is a structural foundation of a system that perpetuates blaming these groups for their struggles. And therefore there is this just justification of unworthiness. Then we internalize such beliefs and we question if there is something wrong with us, and we feel inadequate, we feel like we really don't belong. And so this sense of lack of empathy from others to us is simply because there's a white size standard, right? But I think that the white size standard does not fit all. So these are some of the historical events that have happened that are still the consequences. We're still living the consequences of those foundations, and we are seeing them in even more blatant and dehumanizing in the current environment.
Thank you, Christina. And as you said, she talked a lot about history. When we think about media and society, all of them play a role in those factors that cause a lack of empathy. So, Ryan, are there specific minority groups affected more by empathy crisis, and why do you think that's the case?
So the beauty behind this conversation is we were able to hear a lot of issues that affect race and ethnicity. Um, when I was teaching in my classes at SIU, I would ask one question. Nobody would ever get it right. I would ask them, I would say, what's the largest minority population in America? People would yell out Black. People would yell out Mexican. People would yell out Latino. People with disabilities, I feel like, is the largest population of people that are completely forgotten about. And when we identify people with disabilities, most times we think of able-bodied people, but we don't think about, or non-able-bodied people. We don't think about hidden people with disabilities, right? The hidden disabilities, those mental health issues that we suffer from, that we don't talk about. I just did a training today on imposter syndrome, inferiority complex, and what role that plays in being an African-American man as a clinician, right? So not only am I stepping into a field where it's heavily populated by white women, which rightfully so. You look at Fortune 500 companies, you look at these big CEOs and big companies, big pharma companies, whatever, they're typically ran by middle-aged white men. So of course, there was a population of people that felt like, well, if I have my own thing, I can finally run this, I can finally control it. But whoever would have thought that being someone who's been impacted so severely by some of the most horrific issues when it comes to mental health, which really is trauma induced, is being kicked out and kept out of a field in order to help his own people, right? So I don't think it's really about looking at who's impacted the most, because I think that's what creates an even larger gap when it comes to empathy. I think it's about how we're all impacted and what some of the common themes are that we share. And some of the common themes that we share when it comes to empathy is that we feel like we don't have anybody to hear us. We feel like we don't have anyone to listen. Even when we're trying to articulate our words, it's interesting that if I'm using colloquialisms, right, even though I'm Dr. Reed, if I'm using colloquialisms, I'm almost written off. But if I use grammatically correct English, most people will hear me. Oh my God, you sound so amazing. You sound different than the other people, right? And essentially, it hurts to know that based upon my verbiage, based upon my language, that's what stops you from connecting to me. I told my friend the other day, I said, I hate that the only thing that separates us most times is that we speak a different language. What is that language? Is it English? Is it Spanish? No, it's not. The language that I'm speaking about is how I need to heal. And most times when we talk about healing, we go and we say, well, who needs it the most? If you look at IEPs, if you look at 504 plans, most times we want to treat people that have the most severe mental health issue or behavioral issues, right? But what about those kids that could really utilize some help, but once you take it away, I'm struggling again? See, that's what happens when you put the severity level on things. Or let's take it a step further, right? When we look at the fact that I graduated with 3 different degrees from a predominantly white institution, you think that you should be able to say, well, hey, he is the true definition of a success story. That's what equality looks like. No, because the goal is not equality. The goal is equity. And I don't know if you've seen that image where you have 3 kids that are standing at a gate and each kid is a different height and they're all standing on top of different boxes. But when you put each kid on the same box size, some of them can see over the fence. One of them can see right up to the fence. One of them doesn't see over the fence at all. That's what a lot of people that look like me, but also keep in mind that it's not always about your race or your ethnicity. What about economics, right? That's what it looks like when people come from a demographic, a marginalized community that don't have the resources that other people have. Put them all in the same classroom and let's see who has the biggest need. No, because your needs might not match mine. My needs might not match yours. And despite you being able to provide some of the scholastic needs that I might utilize to help take my life to the next level, what about those hidden things? Because what we don't talk about is, especially in the world of depression, we don't talk about this idea of the perfectionist, right? I did my dissertation on what prevents collegiate athletes from seeking help in regards to psychological and rehabilitative services. And the reason why it started is because we realized that there were so many athletes that had straight A's, that were receiving some of the best scholarships, and they were still committing suicide.
Mhm.
Because a lot of times, what I've learned is if I come off of the field and actually receive the help that's needed, the cheers stop. But if I continue playing while I'm injured, the cheers start to get louder and louder and louder. So I learned at the age of 7 years old how to answer the question, are you hurt or are you injured? I don't know. I don't know. Even when you look at me as Dr. Reed, I know when we were having the conversation beforehand, we were asking questions like, what is something that you feel like people in the audience need to hear, or things like that? And it's like, no, what is something I need to hear? You matter, you're important. And most times, because you think that we're in these different positions, we think we're okay, but we're not. And the reason why I bring that last point up is because that's what creates this issue when we ask the question, who do you think is suffering the most? The person that's typically suffering the most is the one that you don't hear. The kid that you see that's suffering in the classroom is the one that's falling asleep in class. It's the one that's not getting questions answered at home versus at school. So you see an outward way of displaying anger or aggression. It's the one that says, Dad, are you showing up to my game? And after a while, he quits the team because he realizes nobody's showing up. So when you look at who's dealing with the biggest problem, it's everybody. It just completely, it shows up different. It looks different. And that's the question that we need to ask, is not who's dealing with it the most, what resources can we provide that anybody can benefit from.
I agree with that. That each group experiences it differently, but the common thread in all of this is being unseen, unheard, or even being misunderstood because of your identity. So, Christina, I'm gonna lead you to this. Take the next question. How can education then be used to cultivate empathy and challenge biases from an early age?
So let me just tap a little bit on experience with regards to the misunderstanding, right? Dr. Reed mentioned about the English, right? The correct English. And for me as a Latina, if I have a misspelling, it's a reflection of having my English as a second language, right?
Mhm.
Everybody has misspellings, but if I have a misspelling, it is corrected. And as a result, when I was a coordinator for the First Scholars Program, that was part even of an evaluation. Regardless if I was doing amazing with leading the group and the program, my evaluation by white women was that I was misspelling, whereas everybody was misspelling. So those things kind of hurt you and question, right? What is wrong with me? I started looking into research of what's happening. Why am I misspelling? Why one letter before the other? And it is just something that it is a common occurrence with English speakers. But to me, it was seen as an incapacity or to do my job well. So I just wanted to talk about that experience with regards to the education. I think that we uh, just as hate is taught, right? So is empathy. But I think that the one thing that it is extremely important is that we need to start teaching empathy also as a skill. And when I say that is because we have to put it in the curriculum, put it in everything that we are doing as educators, as social workers, as counselors, as educators, in the frame of people that are there educating others to be well and to do well and to be empathic. So for me, teaching empathy as a skill is that sense of cognitive empathy. And I mentioned the other day about so long as we in the current educational system, we continue erasing the histories of our country, of this country, the atrocities that happened to other in history that I just mentioned. If we continue erasing that truth, then we are going to be very limited in teaching empathy, right, as a skill. However, if we are mindful, and luckily we are in a state, in the state of Illinois, in which we are still being able to do all those things so far. So I think that one of the things is important to have the culturally responsive education, right? Learning about cultures, the narrative, the healing, the storytelling, the share stories. We need to share stories about others, about the life, about their struggles. We need to bring the human dignity back. We need to have the social emotional learning into our curriculums, role playing with children. We need to build the perspective taking of exercise, right, of exercising by storytelling and reflection. That at the same time, we're teaching that critical thinking, right, that we don't often use, and that is one of the issues also, that critical thinking is not utilized in our society to understand others, to really study other people, and then therefore they build these assumptions and these negative ideas about specific people that do not look like them. So we have these issues that we need to bring forth. So use the diverse curriculum, the affirming curriculum. When we talk about this diverse and affirming curriculum, we need to, in the college level, have these high impact practices that are relatable to the issues that our students face. If we don't relate our students to what we are teaching, we're going to lose them. But if we do not relate the stories and bring stories to life, that's also going to be an issue of our education system, right? Our college. I used to have a student that, unfortunately, I used to tell her, I said, or the students, when they were in speech, that they needed to talk about the issues that were affecting them, right, in these persuasive speeches. Talk about what it is affecting. And if you're not going to persuade people, at least you're going to be teaching them of the struggles you're going through. Because if we are staying and just being very quiet and don't say anything, then we are not free to tell our stories. And some of the students, actually, in fact, only one student said that as a result of her speech, some of her friends started holding the door for her because she was talking about the family struggles, right? And as an immigrant, what they were going through. So that sense of humanization and that sense of us being sitting next to somebody that they know is struggling, and then all of a sudden, even a simple gesture or opening the door is to alleviate that sense of struggle. So I think that those are super important things, to have our cultural humility. As educators, we don't know, we are always learning. For me, as a Latina that I serve other migrant communities, I don't know the culture completely of people from Guatemala. Many of them don't even speak Spanish, and they speak Quiche. So how am I going to be culturally sensitive and humble to be able to learn from them, right? Instead of saying and thinking, oh, these are indigenous people, what do they know? Their education is very low. No, we learn from everybody. We are learners, and we learn from everybody. And the more we learn about somebody and somebody's struggles, the better we are able to relate, or not to relate, to be able to help them in their struggles. But also, I mean, have in the K through 12, have an array of books that are different, that are linguistic diversity, that are Latino, Indigenous, Black, to have to celebrate the months of history months. And that's something very good. But I also come to understand that, why do we have to celebrate the months? Why are we not just one celebration of life and uniqueness and diversity? And why do we have to relegate our history only to a month? Right? And to bring awareness on a month, once in a one month in a year. And that's something that it yes, it's okay, it's fine, we get to enjoy that. But why do we have to relegate our history and our humanity to a month? And so all these things that are extremely important. Also, embrace the diversity, empower your students, empower people that are different than you, and learn about their identities and their injustices. And then we also learn about the intersectionalities, right? As Ryan mentioned, these people with disabilities, we have Latinos and Black people that are in those intersectionality margins. And these children are placed in special education classes because their culture or their upbringing or the way they are educated is not understood by the white majority educators. So being culturally humble, culturally understanding, we cultivate these minds. We need to cultivate them in a way that if we are always seeing and we want a better future, well, then let's cultivate these future citizens in our system, in our society, to really do well and to be empathic and to have this more unified world, more understanding and more knowledgeable about everybody else's humanity. So I think that those are some of the ways in which we can be teaching and changing the education to really be intentional about teaching empathy as a skill, and not just just take it for granted, or that it's going to be taught at home, because at home many times hate is being taught. So as educators, how can we deviate that teaching? How can we entice these children to do better, and never underestimating even a smile, even the smile of our Black and brown children, and uh, to just be an empower, to be an example, to really be the embody the word that means to be an educator. And
Wow.
education, yes, and education is not just academic. It is not just teaching math and grammar. And no, education is to educate the mind, to educate the heart, to educate the skill, right? And one of the best skills that we can invest is to teaching in empathy, empathy to the well-being for them, for everybody. Because if we don't teach empathy and we are feeling isolated and marginalized and divided, then that is the issue with our mental health. And then mental health, and then our physical health. Because stress can provoke high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, all of these things. And our Black and brown populations are at the top of the charts in those physical ailments. So we need to be cognizant and intentional about teaching empathy as a skill, and utilizing as many books and stories and understanding of our Black and brown populations.
So I can guess exposing the kids to the truth, teaching children accurate history, and sharing those diverse stories. All of that, I think, it shapes a generation and it can break cycles of biases. So, Ryan, if we don't do that, what are some of the long-term societal impacts if this crisis isn't addressed?
I wanted to, before I get into that, I wanted to point out something that she mentioned, and I had to write it down. Um, you said, why do we have to break down our cultural celebrations into 1 month? I think another question is, why do we have to stop celebrating after 1 month? I think it's beautiful that we have the space to celebrate things differently, right? But even when we look at education, because I just wanted to piggyback on that one really quick, um, schools were designed to create factory workers. So schools are designed to do exactly what they've been doing. When they say the system is broken, it's rigged. No, it's working perfectly fine, and it's set up perfectly fine to do exactly what it's been doing for years. The problem is that education has been reduced to memorizing facts and chasing grades, and it strips students down out of their humanity, right? We live in a society where children can solve equations, they can recite back to you different facts, but they struggle to name their feelings. Most students, even though culture should be celebrated, and if you look at different cultures, you can ask a person, well, what does your name mean?
Mm-hmm.
What I do with my boys, my young men, when I go into these schools, the one question that I have is, I'll have kids stand up and I'll ask each one of them, I'll say your name and tell me what it means. One of the last schools that I went to, not one of the kids knew what their name meant. I said, and you guys want to know what's interesting? You don't know what your name means. Yet you spend so much time thinking about another person, and look to the person next to you. You think about what they think about you and how they judge you, and they don't even know what their name means. So if you think about it, you're taking on the judgment of somebody that doesn't even know who they are. What should education really be spent doing? It's teaching us about our internal locus, teaching us about who we are, where we've come from, right? And not always whitewashing or minimizing the experiences that we've had within our cultures. What will this look like if we lose sight of culture? What will this look like if we start losing sight of our true history? Well, you're seeing it today. Books are being taken out of libraries.
Mm-hmm.
Kids are forgetting who they are. Even back in the day, you had Big Mama and Big Papa. Now Big Papa's gone. You have a lot of mothers and you have quite a few grandmothers, but you don't have too many uncles. You have less fathers. And when you really look at the struggles of what's happening, because I'm answering your question, when you look at the struggles of what's happening, you're seeing it come out into fruition. The plan that was set to destroy our people, and I say our people loosely because we are all each other's people, it's working exactly as it was planned. Most people don't know that the psychological impacts of a person's body actually impact a person's body
Mm-hmm.
physically as well.
Mm-hmm.
You ever seen an older Black man that has gone through life and he's dealt with a lot of trauma with his body kind of hunched over? Well, most people don't know it, and this is a part of teaching people about themselves. When you experience a substantial amount of trauma, your body has a way of protecting your heart. And so what happens is your rib cage begins to curve in to shield your heart from the emotional trauma that you've experienced. That's why Black and brown men are dying at higher rates of strokes, high blood pressure, and so many other issues that heart disease, heart failure. Why? Because our bodies are impacted the same way physically as they are emotionally and mentally. The problem is that we aren't educating people on these things. We aren't educating people on the importance of a diet. We talk about mental health, but your teacher doesn't tell you, hey, we should go outside to have class today. Do you realize if we went outside to have class, we'd have exposure to the sunlight, which is great for your skin, and it increases your endorphins and it increases your dopamine production level, and you might actually learn how to heal? I showed you all last week what my office looks like. Like I have plants everywhere. Schools aren't designed for healing. There's not really a big difference between your son's high school classroom and the penitentiary walls. There's not a big difference between going into a hospital and looking at the colors of the wall, which they're typically white or pearl, with no plants and no chance of actually surviving. So what happens? You'll have men that don't know how to talk about the pain that they're currently dealing with, and they take it out on their children. I teach my parents in the parenting skill training courses that if you don't learn how to love the aspects of yourself that you hate, those same character traits will show up in your children and you'll secretly begin hating your children. That's what will happen. If we don't learn how to educate our children and tell them it's not your fault, you didn't deserve it. You deserve to be seen. You deserve to be heard. They'll grow up and turn into angry adults that never really realize the importance of learning how to deal with emotional trauma, and will raise them to believe that they have what we call anger management issues.
Mm-hmm.
When in all actuality, anger isn't the problem. Anger is a secondary or a tertiary response to an activating.
Oh,
What does that mean? You felt something else first. And I love educating my boys because it's almost like they get a breath of fresh air with finally being able to learn how to be vulnerable. I say, if I walked up to you and I just hit you in your face, what's the first thing you felt? The first thing most of them usually say is, I'd hit you back. What does that show me? You lack the emotional vocabulary to express how you felt. I said, I didn't ask you what you would do. I asked you how you felt. Well, I would be angry. No, you wouldn't. What do you mean? No, you wouldn't. Anger is a defense mechanism. It stops you from having to deal with being vulnerable. What would you feel first? I would feel shock. And then I would feel confusion. Would the next one be anger? No. I would feel fear.
yeah.
And then I would experience sadness. And then the next one might be, would it be anger? No, it might be embarrassment. And what you deal with in these schools a lot of the time is the moment that a child, even an adult, feels embarrassed,
Mm-hmm.
they deflect it and they take it out on somebody that didn't cut them. So what we'll witness, we'll keep walking around these streets and we'll see the homeless population increase. We'll see addiction begin to climb. We'll see suicidal ideations turn into suicidal attempts and then suicidal successes. We'll see fathers leaving a home because the world says you don't deserve to be here and we reward you. The government rewards you for leaving. We'll see a lot of single mothers raising children that eventually walk away because they realize I should just give up because nobody believes in me. We'll continue seeing a world that could learn to heal together, continue to find more rips and breakages in communities that could have began to heal together had we learned how to be vulnerable together. Because the only way that we'll truly heal is if we learn how to find the superpower in learning how to be vulnerable. The only way that we will really heal is if when you ask a person, how are you doing? And they say, fine, you ask them again, no, how are you really doing? And if you stand there for at least 30 seconds, you might get a different answer. But if you stand there with intentionality, you might actually get a lot more from them. And you won't have to go home and watch the news and find out that they were dealing with a lot more than Fine actually said that they were dealing with.
Absolutely. I completely agree about the asking, right, to those two people. I used to ask my students, how are you doing? How's your day going? And they would say, okay. And then I would say, wait a second, that okay didn't sound too okay. What's going on? And then they will just throw everything that they were going through. And so that understanding and that providing that safe space for people to be vulnerable, right? I always say that that I have these core conditions that I put in my practice with everybody is that no blame, no shame, and no assumptions, right? Come as you are. I'll learn from you. The better I learn from you, the better I can able to help. But I will never shame, I will never blame, and I will never assume as anybody whatever they're going or shame what they are going through or what they've done, because I need to find out what happened and utilize that as a learning experience and thank them for the vulnerability of trusting me, of trusting what they are saying, right? And it is that aspect of teaching community. Right now, I'm working on a newsletter for the community, for the Southern Illinois community, and it is a bilingual newsletter, which is cultivating our well-being. And it is tips of mental health, tips of well-being in general. And so for me, that is extremely important, teaching the community, embracing their ancestral costumes and beliefs and works, because I think that that's tuning into who they are and being vulnerable and providing a space. But I also want to say something about what you were mentioning about the strokes and heart attacks. And yes, the Black and Brown community are in the top of data of going through strokes, but they are also underrepresented in the research for strokes and the burden that they carry. So none of our populations are considered for those research. And so how is the research community going to learn about that? How are they going to learn also about that and how to treat our communities? Because there's no interest. And that's another way of being invisible and erased. And then in which they are not looked at. The same with the mental health issues. In our communities, right, we undermine the mental health. Oh, you're fine. There's the stigma of saying and being vulnerable and saying that there's something going on. And there is the stigma of being weak or being not ready to do A, B, and C, or being lazy. And we also perpetuate those same beliefs that have been internalized by the beliefs of the white majority and by those labels that have been placed upon us. And I also always say that we always talk about resilience. Oh, our people are very resilient, but I say that resilience without progress is simply struggle. We are not, if we're struggling, we are not being resilient. If we're not progressing, if we are consistently struggling with the same issues over and over, then that's not resilience, that's simply struggle. And so just wanted to leave it at that.
You add that. So what I get out of all of this, if empathy is cultivated, then we can see our society would thrive. But if without empathy, the cost is too high. You know, we got broken communities and loss of potential. So, Christina, what personal steps can people take to cultivate a greater empathy in their daily lives?
Um, that is a really great question, right? Because there has to be the willingness to cultivate and to the. That's why I say that it when I do presentations and I talk, the first thing that I say is that we're going to be talking, and that I want people to open their mind, but especially their heart. And so that's why that combination of mind and heart, as far as creating being intentionally in how you treat people, being intentionally empathic, being um, intentionally in how you are going to provide a safe, loving, and brave space to the people you come in contact with, whether it is students, co-workers, people in the community, anybody. Our LGBT community, our Native American community, our Black and Brown people, our all our intersectionalities, and our white population also, right? We don't have to behave at the level that they behave sometimes with us, because then we're doing the exact same thing. We don't have to put up with that either, but we cannot bring ourselves to the level of not being empathic with a human, because then we are also erasing and taking humanity away. So there's this the golden rule, right? Do unto others as they would like them to do unto you. I think about the oh my gosh, it just skipped my mind. And that, which is another rule, that it is do unto others as they would like them to do to them. because I cannot put myself at the same level of somebody that does not have any privileges. What do they need? If I ask them to treat me the way I want to be treated, even if they don't have the resources or the capacity, then I'm going to see them as somebody else different. So what I need to do is to treat them, what do you need? I don't want to ask why you don't have this, because I know better. I have been to an education, and if education taught me something, is that I know how this system works. And so I'm not going to be belittling people that have not been educated. On the contrary, they have other education and other intelligence that I'm maybe not even capable of learning. And so that mutual learning consistently, learning about others, learning intentionally, taking away our biases, taking or checking them. I always, and being the very intentional aspect of doing the good, I always think myself that every day I am willing the good. Every day I am willing the good, and that is my intention. And so in within that, what does it look like? Well, that I am going to treat everybody with respect, with dignity, that I am going to be smile as face, that I am willing to learn about somebody else, that I am willing to embrace the differences. So for me, those are steps that have to be intentional. You never wake up with the intention to be bad to somebody, or to have a bad day, or to have an issue or a fight with somebody. So if you set that intention from the very early in the morning about how you want to treat other people, and understanding and recognizing their uniquenesses and their differences, then you're doing a great way of creating empathy, of understanding, of listening. Um, so that's what I would tell people, to be intentional in the way they treat others, to be uh, to 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 think about something that they want to do, something good for somebody that they have some sort of a um, mm, internal discomfort with. Get close to them. And let me tell you just a little story that when I was a pre-K teacher, I had these children, this kid that he was almost 4 years old. He was still pooping in his pants, and it was a I was in charge of him, and it was so difficult because I would take him to the bathroom and he will not poop, and then I would take him back to the classroom and then he would poop, and it was like a adult. Right, so cleaning that diaper and cleaning and putting again a diaper, and it was a bother. I kept taking him with me home in my mind. Oh my goodness, what am I going to do? Oh, tomorrow I'm going to deal with him. Oh, and so I decided one day, and I'm just like, come on, Rudy, it's going to be great. Today you're going to be awesome. And I remember he's sitting there and just like really not interested in being potty trained. And all of a sudden, I just looked at him, and I looked at him and I just said, "You have beautiful eyes. Your eyes are amazing." And his eyes lit up. His eyes lit up, and he had that expression of a smile, and his eyes were sparkling. And I said, "So we're going to have a good day." And that, regardless if he was going to be pooping in the bathroom or not. After that, it was just like, hi. And just I was just focusing on that humanity of this child. And pretty soon he was potty trained. Pretty soon. So changing also that dynamic of how you feel about somebody with just something that it bothers you, change it. Change it to your benefit and the benefit of others. and the benefit of society and your communities, and saving lives, and being able to save somebody that it is going through a difficult time, that is thinking about the unthinkable. Just be intentional in how you treat, and be the person that really changes the dynamic of somebody else's having a difficult day.
Okay, Miss Christina, we're down, guys, to our last two questions. And Ryan, I want you to start us off on this next question. If someone is watching this panel, if they're feeling unseen, unheard, or hopeless, what would you say to them right now?
Um, I I would I would look in the mirror. Why do I say that? Because I think the biggest person that we need to talk to is our inner child, the person that we really left behind, that really is begging us to come back. Um, I would tell them that you deserve you. Far too often do we try to run away from ourselves to go try to help heal other people, because a lot of times it feels a lot easier to do that. Um, and essentially, I'd say you matter. Your story matters. And even if the world has ignored you, I see you. Um, I would say that hopelessness is the residue of being unheard. But the moment that your story is witnessed by other people, that's where true healing begins. They say it in the church, they talk about this idea of a testimony, but a testimony is only created after you've essentially passed a test. And we have to start hurting on purpose. I teach my young boys, I say, it's okay to cry. Crying is one of God's way of allowing us to heal. It's allowing us the opportunity to pour out our pain with no way to return. I would tell them that it's so important that you learn how to love yourself and do the shadow work that's needed to heal. Majority of the work that we need to do, most people will never know that we really need it. I would tell them that you can't continue holding the space of other people's tears without wiping your own. You cannot love people deeply if you have not first allowed yourself to love the broken pieces of you. You cannot speak life into anybody else if you are still suffocating under the silence of several unhealed wounds. Empathy begins at home. Empathy begins inside. Empathy begins in the mirror. Before you can ever extend a hand outward, you have to comfort your own shadows and the shadows of your own soul. You have to stare down the shame that you've buried for far too long, and the grief that you've continued to silence, and the trauma that you've continuously denied or felt like other people have denied. Because the truth is, you will always project what you do not process. If you do not process your pain, you will pass it on. And if you do not heal those wounds, you'll continue to wound other people. But when you choose healing, when you dare to unclench your fist and finally open up your heart, empathy becomes your ministry. It becomes essentially like your daily act of worship. And that empathy is a decision to finally listen to yourself first so that you know how to listen to other people's hearts. That's the only way that you can truly embrace this idea of love that will continue to conquer all things. There's so much power in empathy. I love the fact that we're having this conversation because empathy dismantles systems of segregation. Empathy dismantles systems of racism. Empathy dismantles systems that you've created over the course of time of self-hatred. Empathy continues to interrupt generational curses. It builds bridges to form relationships that our hearts are yearning for, but our minds are telling us that we don't deserve. Empathy is like a currency to a kingdom. But if we don't learn how to stop running from our own scars, we'll continue hurting people, like I said, that never cut us. Yeah. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Wow. Christina, he talked about people not being invisible. And I would say you're not invisible, you're not forgotten. What would you add to that?
Well, the funny thing with me is so we're on the same question, right?
Yes, in the
Okay,
same question. I want you to
so
answer. We'll go to the other.
I'm going to start with a sort of like a metaphor, right? What would I tell people that are seeing this? Just to think about the cycle of the butterfly, and I'm going to talk about specifically the monarch butterfly, for because the monarch butterfly is able to do and to travel and stand a lot, and travels from Mexico to Canada to the United States to this area, and comes to become this very beautiful and vulnerable um, being, right? A butterfly. But then when the butterfly has the cycle, right, is the caterpillar, and then it goes into the chrysalis. And in the chrysalis goes and it hangs onto a tree branch, right? And in the chrysalis, it is dark, it is unknown. Um, it is that sense of working, of growing, and then all of a sudden this beautiful um, butterfly with these amazing colors comes out to the light and comes more beautiful than ever, right? And so for me, that process of telling people, it is just that the for me the definition of hanging there. Be that person in that chrysalis. If you are a person in that chrysalis with anguish, with anxiety, with sadness, with depression, with planning in the unthinkable, hang in there. Hang in there, because that's what is working. That's where you are becoming the strength. It will happen. It will pass. It will pass. You are needed. Um, we mourn the when somebody dies that we don't even know, and mourning more people as a result of mental health, as a result of feeling unseen and broken and sad and neglected. um Love, that what Dr. Reed mentioned about being that love, that is happening in the chrysalis. That is the work of it, that is happening. So do the work, hang in there, hang in there, and then become this amazing, beautiful butterfly that it is going to go everywhere and is going to bring happiness and smiles to other people, right? In the metaphorical sense of the word. But just talk to people, talk to others. um, I always say that we build relationships at the speed of trust. Have somebody that you trust and talk about what is happening. Talk to others. Um, mm, be vulnerable and understanding that you deserve to be listened, you deserve to be seen, you deserve to talk to somebody that you trust. Look for help. Um, And it is maybe not that easy, right? Because it seems as if a sense of weakness or any kind of label that we can think of in order for us not to be open because of the experiences that we have had, or because we feel like we're not worthy or we're entitled to think that we are not, they don't belong to us because we don't belong, and we have that sense of not belonging. But um there must be somebody that you can trust. Go with your gut feeling of somebody that is going to have your back and is going to provide you the resources and the attention and um, um, the listening that you need and the help that you deserve. And just hang in there.
Exactly. And I would add to that, even if the world overlooks you, your existence is purposeful. And keep holding on and keep speaking, even if your voice shakes, I would say, even if your voice shakes. So, on our last question, and this question is again to both of you all, and Christina, Ryan, you can start us off here. Have you ever felt unseen or unheard in your own story?
I think the clear answer is yes. Um, but I'll just say that feeling unseen became the fire that called me to ensure that no one else felt what that was like. I wanted to ensure that no one in my presence would ever feel invisible ever again. Feeling unseen is what allowed me to create my own sense of visibility through counseling, through speaking, through healing, through touching lives, through working with children, through working with adults. Um, and a lot of times I think far too often do we allow the traumas that we've experienced to bring us down versus help us grow. I like studying and talking about post-traumatic growth, the growth that stems from experiencing trauma, right? Um, and also just taking it a step further, what it being unseen allowed me to discover, it allowed me to discover the broken aspects of myself. And then I realized that I was broken on purpose. And there's this old art called kintsugi that was created in the mid 1500s, where they would take broken pottery and they would mold it back together with gold and silver resin. And they did that because essentially you could still make out the cracks in the pottery, but they wanted you to be able to see them because they viewed brokenness as an opportunity to celebrate your past. They viewed it as an opportunity to celebrate where you had come from, what you had gone through. So, as much as it was an uncomfortable process of being unseen and unheard, it allowed me to make others' voices sound louder than mine.
All right, Christina.
So for me, the irony is that I have not felt as much as seen as overseen. When I moved to this country more than 30 years ago, I did not speak English. And so therefore I was overseen. I was the poor girl that doesn't speak English. And all of a sudden, I was an immigrant. I was no longer Christina. All of a sudden, I was this person with long dark hair in a white majority that would always have a second look by somebody. And so I felt always overseen. And when I did my master's, and mind you, I have had a lot of privileges. I came here with married to a U.S. citizen. I have 3 children. I have been able to be a stay-at-home mom. And once my children started kindergarten, that's when I decided that I wanted to finish and fulfill my dream of finishing my education. And so I enrolled at SIU at the counseling program. And I remember one of my first classes was the cross-cultural communication. And we were about 40 students in the class, the majority white students, male, females. And we did an exercise, and mind you, this was a 2-week immersive course, and we did the exercise that it is the privilege walk. And so all the statements that are being said, you give a step ahead if you have privilege, or just give a step back if you fit the statement that it is told. And then by this is the purpose is that the people that are going back and back and back are the last privilege. So at the end of the exercise and at the end of all the sentences being told, I was at the end of the line. I was the only one at the end of the line. There were other students from Asian, no, from Libya ahead, a big part ahead of me. And all of a sudden, when everybody turned around to see who was in the back of the room, that it was me, I felt this enormous sense of heaviness in me, because at that moment I realized that simply by who I represent, being overseen, having all these opportunities, all these privileges of going and having an education, I was just basically one of everybody that has been unseen. And that was my whole community, my Hispanic Latino community, undocumented community, immigrants. And when I realized that, that was the sense of what am I going to do? I felt like I was holding the world of the issues of my people. And so for me, that made me realize that the Hispanic Latino community is usually being said that it is the invisible minority, but we are not invisible, right? We are the most documented, the most politicized. We are the a burden to society, the ones that, so we are this array of negativity in this society, right? And so that is overlooked, and not overlooked, that is only looked. But what it is invisible within my community is the needs of my community, the lack of access to quality healthcare, the lack of access to education, the lack of access to work, the lack of access to have a driver's license and do better. So those needs are what are unseen, but I had to be in that role in order for me to see that. But for me, I've always been overseen. I've always been scrutinized. My accent has always been a sense of, oh, she's not good enough for this job, but then, oh, she's bilingual, and let me bring her to translate for this family or for these people. So those are the things that I think that are invisible for a benefit, but then also not for other things that I am capable of doing.
Thank you and Ryan so much. And I want to add this because as a mother who lost my only child to suicide, there were times where I felt when I was grieving, it made me feel invisible also. And then because people didn't always know what to say, so they said nothing. And so that made me feel a certain kind of way. And so and that what led me to start my organization and share my story so others will know, even when the world overlooks us, our voices can still be heard and and heal other people, through that transformation can happen during that time. So I thank you both so much for being here tonight. I am going to turn it back over to Dimple. She is going to we're going to go through and see if any questions in the chat. She's going to do that part for us and share some resources, and then I'll close us out. Take it away, Dimple.
Thank you. Thank
Okay.
you. Such an amazing conversation. And I could relate to, I think all of us can, and just so much. I'm like, yes, I agree. feel heard. So thank you so much. I know it means a lot to a lot of people watching and be able to share this. So we do have one question that came up. Um, how do mental health treatment centers in Illinois provide services like residential to diverse populations with empathy and best practices? Is it enough, or do we need to do more?
There's
Who
a
wants?
lot more to do. In my case, with the Hispanic Latino population, simply we do not have cultural and linguistic appropriate services, right? We do not have, first of all, there's the lack of cultural awareness and in humility to learn to help heal the community. Um, so those are things that are extremely important that we need to address, that we need to make available those services for our population. You know, even if our population are bilingual and they speak the language, everybody rather have somebody that speaks their language and that can relate to their issues and that can understand their culture and their background in their cultural background and customs and then also integrating that with cultural humility, such practices that are healing for specific communities in the Hispanic Latino population. So yes, we have to do a lot of work. One thing for me would be the implementation of the class, which is the cultural and linguistic appropriate services, cultural humility. Um, just be willing and easy things that they can do also is to be a welcoming space, having phrases in Spanish that provide that are welcome, or symbolisms that are known for the Hispanic Latino community. The monarch butterfly, it's one. Have a map of Latin America and ask people where they come from, and ask maybe offer I don't know, that simple, comfortable environment for them to feel welcome and that they belong and that they're going to be the person that the mental health provider is going to be focusing on.
Christina, I have a follow-up question for that. Have you noticed this or experienced this, that having someone from the same cultural background, is that creating more stigma or shame to approach that person for support or share your story or even explain anything? Or does that create that comfort that somebody understands where I'm coming from?
Well, I think it is understanding where they're coming from. I mean, if it is a mental health provider, they can understand that background, right? And so I think that what it is difficult for us as a Latino community is the stigma and the shaming that comes from families, right? We usually, I mean, our parents have lived with trauma. Our immigrant parents have lived with trauma, holding 1, 2, 3 jobs to provide food. And so when they are doing this work back to back to back, when their children are depressed or are sad or with anxiety, they can say, I feel, or I'm not doing anything. I feel like I am very sleepy. And then parents, obviously, right, are going to say, well, tired of what? I've been working 3 jobs and I keep going, right? And so that is the sense of the stigmatizing or dismissing our own sadness or experiences because of the experiences that we are being holding as being resilient and tough, right?
Absolutely.
And so that is one of the issues. But if a mental health provider that has knowledge of the culture, it will help and it will really normalize the sense of those feelings that it is okay to show those emotions, that it is okay to talk with parents, and also the educational aspect to teach parents about the mental health and destigmatizing the feeling of children that are not doing anything or being seen as lazy also by our own family, right? So that's the stigmatizing sometimes comes from family, and many times it's internalized by the society, how they see us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was a great answer. Go
So,
ahead, Doctor.
oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. I was just turning it over to you.
I think the deeper question is how do we offer services to them? I know a lot of times we look at, okay, so the question is not just what services do we offer, how do we offer these services to them? Because essentially, when we're going through, say we're going through our programs, we're going through our master's or doctoral programs, bachelor's level programs, counseling programs, a lot of times we're taught this term to check your biases at the door. I've always taught my students not to do that. I've always taught my students to make yourself aware of your biases because I think it's important that you learn what these biases mean. Where were they created from? What exactly do I gain from holding on to these biases? And a lot of times when you gain a better understanding of your biases, you gain an understanding of your hotspots, your triggers. So when we walk into these rooms, we may hear something that alarms us. We may hear something that we feel like is culturally insensitive. But what we have to do is we have to stop walking into, say, if we're in a residential facility, we have to stop walking into young Black men's rooms and see defiance and label him as oppositional or having anger issues, while at the same time ignoring the layers of trauma, systematic racism, and grief that might have shaped him into who he is. We can't look at a Latina mother who's wrestling with depression and completely dismiss her spiritual and cultural frameworks that give her strength. We must first see people as people, and then we'll see whole humans begin to heal. We have to see people as people who are carrying histories that have actually helped protect them. So instead of saying, oh, he's displaying maladaptive behavior patterns, we have to learn how those behavior patterns have helped protect them. I know a lot of times when working with the youth that come from inner cities, we're talking about, gun control and different things like that. And it's tough where it's like, maybe this is what's protected him for so long, but let's figure out why he feels like he needs to be protected. Let's figure out how we can find other ways to protect the people that we're currently serving. Essentially just finding different ways to help others heal while at the same time embracing the fact that our differences are prevalent, but that's what makes us who we are.
Sorry. Thank you so much. I agree completely with that. And just wanted to say thank you, everybody that attended. On behalf of that, we will be coming to an end. And for our panel discussion, and resources are provided in the discussion section in the chat.
All right. Again, like she said, thank you. And I'm going to close with this. I have a message to close with. Tonight, we sat together, guys, in a space where we could be honest about what it means to live unseen and unheard, and yet to still long for empathy in a world that often feels divided. What I hope we take away is this: empathy doesn't require us to agree on everything, it doesn't erase our differences. Empathy is simply yet a powerful act of seeing another person, listening with an open heart, and being willing to say, your story matters, you matter. If we each leave here tonight committed to practicing that, one conversation, one act of compassion, one moment of listening at a time, we can begin to close the gaps of division. We don't need to change the whole world all at once. We just need to be kind, be the kind of people who choose to see and hear others right where we are. So my challenge to you is this: tomorrow, look for someone you might normally overlook, listen without judgment, extend kindness even when it's not easy, because empathy is the bridge that carries us from isolation to community, from being unseen to being embraced. We want to thank you all for being here, for lending your voice and your hearts, and for reminding us that even in a divided world, love and empathy are still possible and still powerful. Thank you guys for being here on tonight. We appreciate it so much. Christina and Ryan, we appreciate you all on tonight. Have a great evening, everyone.